They say silence is peace, but for a Sigma male, silence after caring too much is transformation. When he finally stops caring, it's not out of defeat, it's clarity. He's been loyal, patient, and understanding far longer than most deserve. But every time he gave, he watched people take. Every time he explained, he watched others misunderstand on purpose. Until one day, something in him just switches off. The emotions that once drove him now become fuel for detachment. He stops chasing, stops explaining, and stops expecting anything from anyone. That's when he becomes dangerous. Not because he's angry, but because he's free. When a Sigma male stops caring, he reclaims all the energy he used to waste on trying to be understood. His focus turns inward, sharper, colder, more strategic. He starts building instead of explaining, observing instead of reacting. You can't manipulate someone who no longer needs approval. You can't hurt a man who no longer takes things personally. He becomes untouchable, not because he's heartless, but because he's done investing in people who mistake loyalty for weakness. This video will break down the psychology of what really happens when a Sigma male detaches, how emotional withdrawal turns into strength, why indifference becomes his power, and how that shift changes the way everyone around him behaves. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to UltraWise, a space for silent thinkers, disciplined men, and Sigma minds who move without noise but change everything around them. And tell me in the comments, have you ever reached that point where you simply stopped caring and everything finally became clear? He stops reacting emotionally and starts observing silently. When a Sigma male stops caring, the first thing that disappears is his emotional reaction. He no longer flinches when disrespected, argues when misunderstood, or wastes energy trying to defend his point. He's been through enough to understand that reacting gives power to the wrong people, so instead he observes. Calm, silent, and unreadable, his stillness becomes his weapon. People mistake his silence for surrender, but what they don't realize is that he's already detaching, analyzing every pattern and deciding who stays and who doesn't. This shift doesn't happen overnight. It comes after countless moments of being drained by chaos, manipulation, and disappointment. He used to care enough to explain himself, to fix things, to prove his loyalty. But now he's learned that peace comes from distance, not dialogue. He stops trying to make people see his worth, because the ones who couldn't already weren't meant to. The more he observes, the more he understands that emotional control isn't coldness. It's clarity. And that clarity makes him dangerous, because he no longer reacts on impulse. He studies motives, notices energy shifts, and keeps his next move hidden. While others waste time arguing or showing off, he's gathering information, preparing his response in silence. That's what sets him apart. His calm isn't emptiness, it's precision. You can't provoke someone who's mastered detachment. People start to feel uneasy around him because his silence forces them to confront their own noise. They realize they can't read him, can't manipulate him, can't pull emotion from someone who's already mastered himself. The Sigma male's restraint becomes his power. He doesn't need revenge, validation, or attention, just distance and focus. When he stops reacting emotionally, he doesn't become weaker, he becomes untouchable. His silence speaks louder than words. His patience becomes strategy, and his detachment becomes dominance. Because once a Sigma male starts observing instead of reacting, every situation becomes a game he's already winning without ever having to play. His detachment makes him unpredictable and impossible to control. When a Sigma male detaches, something fundamental shifts. He no longer plays by anyone's rules. You can't guilt him, flatter him, or manipulate him because his emotions are no longer the steering wheel others use to grab. Once he stops caring, he becomes unpredictable. And unpredictability is power. The same man who once over-explained himself now gives nothing away. The people who used to control him with silence, pressure, or affection suddenly lose all leverage. His calm unnerves them because they can't tell what he's thinking or what he'll do next. This detachment doesn't come from arrogance. It comes from exhaustion turned into wisdom. He's seen how people twist emotions to get control, how kindness can be exploited and empathy can be weaponized. So now he refuses to hand over the tools of his own manipulation. When someone tries to trigger him, he doesn't argue, he watches. When someone plays games, he doesn't respond, he withdraws. His lack of reaction becomes his protection. The manipulator expects fire and chaos, but the Sigma gives them silence. And silence, to them, feels like defeat. And this emotional distance makes him unreadable. You can't predict a man who isn't driven by external validation. You can't control someone whose peace isn't dependent on anyone else's approval. He moves when he chooses, not when pushed. He says no without guilt, walks away without warning, and disappears without closure. Because he's no longer chained to the need to explain himself. The moment he stopped caring what others thought, he became free from every invisible leash that once held him. To the outside world, that calm looks dangerous because they can't manipulate what they can't measure. He's a storm behind still eyes, a man who acts from logic, not emotion. You can't read him, can't provoke him, and can't predict when he'll make his move. And that unpredictability gives him absolute control. When a Sigma male detaches, he doesn't become heartless. He becomes sovereign. He stops being a piece in someone else's game and starts becoming the one who sets the pace. That's why he's impossible to control. Because once he's mastered detachment, no one's chaos can reach him again. He no longer needs validation, which gives him complete freedom. The moment a Sigma male stops caring what people think, he becomes unstoppable. For most of his life, he played the quiet role, the one who tried to do everything right, earn respect, and prove his worth through effort and loyalty. But one day he realizes something powerful. Validation is a cage. It keeps men trapped, chasing approval from people who will never give it freely. And when that realization hits, he walks away from the game entirely. He no longer explains, proves, or defends. He just is. When he stops needing validation, his energy shifts completely. The opinions that used to sting no longer touch him. The silence that once felt like rejection now feels like peace. He doesn't measure success by applause, attention, or approval, only by progress. He's no longer controlled by compliments or criticism, because both mean the same thing to him now: noise. That's what makes him dangerous. A man who's free from external control can't be manipulated. You can't pressure him with guilt or praise. He's unmoved either way. This freedom makes him magnetic. People notice the difference instantly. The confidence that doesn't need an audience, the calm that doesn't demand validation. He carries himself with quiet certainty, the kind that says, "I know who I am, even if you don't." That level of independence draws attention, not because he asks for it, but because real confidence always does. Ironically, when he stops caring to impress, he becomes unforgettable. But this freedom isn't arrogance, it's peace. The Sigma male doesn't reject validation because he hates people. He simply no longer depends on them to define his worth. His validation comes from progress, discipline, and alignment with his own standards. He moves quietly, chasing excellence, not attention. And that's why people can't understand him. They're still performing for approval while he's already outgrown the stage. When a Sigma male no longer needs validation, he becomes a ghost to expectation, untouchable, self-assured, and free. No one owns his attention, his time, or his emotions anymore. And that's the paradox. The moment he stops seeking approval from the world starts noticing him. Because nothing is more powerful than a man who doesn't need to be seen to know his own value. And his focus shifts from people to purpose. And that's when he levels up. When a Sigma male stops caring, the noise fades, and suddenly everything becomes clear. He no longer wastes energy trying to please, fix, or impress anyone. The moment he realizes that people's approval is temporary but his purpose is eternal, something inside him clicks. His focus sharpens. The same intensity he once poured into relationships, explanations, and proving his worth now flows into his goals. And that shift changes everything. When he locks onto a mission, his energy becomes unstoppable. He wakes up with direction, not distraction. He works in silence, obsessed with progress, not recognition. The outside world might think he's cold or distant, but in reality, he's just a line. The drama that once consumed him no longer gets his attention, only growth does. Every setback becomes data, every mistake a lesson. He stops taking things personally and starts taking full responsibility for his evolution. That's the moment he levels up, when emotion turns into execution. People around him feel the difference. The man who used to listen to everyone's opinions now listens only to his inner compass. His focus intimidates those still lost in noise because he's no longer seeking company. He's chasing mastery. He doesn't talk about his plans, he builds them. He doesn't argue, he proves. And while others crave instant results, he's content with consistency. He knows that silence and discipline always outlast words and validation. This transformation is what makes him truly dangerous, not because he wants to dominate, but because he's learned to direct all his energy inward. Every ounce of care that once kept him emotionally trapped now fuels his ambition. He stops running toward people and starts running toward purpose. And when a Sigma male finds his purpose, he becomes untouchable. A man driven by clarity instead of emotion, vision instead of validation. That's when he stops existing to be liked and starts living to become legendary. He stops explaining himself and lets results speak instead. At some point, the Sigma male realizes that words no longer matter, only results do. He's done wasting breath trying to justify his actions or prove his intentions. The people who truly understand him don't need an explanation, and the ones who don't will twist whatever he says anyway. So he stops talking and starts doing. Every quiet move becomes a statement. Every new level of growth becomes a response. His results start speaking louder than any argument ever could. This shift marks a turning point in his mindset. He used to feel misunderstood, trying to make others see his vision, his effort, his loyalty. But now he understands that clarity doesn't come from convincing, it comes from consistency. So he lets go of the need to be seen. He focuses on execution, not explanation. His work, his discipline, his progress, they become his language. He stops chasing validation and starts chasing mastery. And that's when people begin to notice the difference. When a Sigma male falls silent, the noise around him grows louder. People start wondering what he's building, what he's planning, why he suddenly seems so calm. They don't realize that silence isn't withdrawal, it's preparation. While others argue over opinions, he's refining his craft. While they talk about what they'll do, he's already done it. And when the results finally show, there's no need for him to say a word. His success becomes the conversation. What makes this dangerous is how detached he's become from the need for recognition. He no longer seeks attention. He earns respect through quiet dominance. You won't see him posting his progress or explaining his grind. You'll just feel the shift when his results start shaking the room. His energy says, "Watch if you want," I have nothing to prove. That's what makes the Sigma male powerful after he stops caring. He doesn't argue, he doesn't defend, he doesn't explain, he just delivers. And when his results finally speak, even his silence commands attention, because the loudest man in the room will always lose to the one whose work speaks for itself. His silence becomes power. It unnerves those who used to manipulate him. When a Sigma male finally stops caring, his silence becomes the loudest thing about him. The people who once thrived on his reactions, who used his emotions to pull strings, suddenly find themselves powerless. The same man they could once provoke with guilt, drama, or flattery now gives them nothing. No response, no argument, no attention. And that nothingness terrifies them. Because when the Sigma goes silent, it doesn't mean he's confused. It means he's done. His silence is not passive, it's controlled. It's the space between emotion and action, a moment of mastery. He's learned that words can be twisted, but silence can't be used against you. So, he stops explaining his decisions. He doesn't announce his boundaries. He enforces them through distance. He doesn't warn you he's leaving. One day, he's just gone. Energy withdrawn, mind detached, peace restored. That quiet exit hits harder than any confrontation ever could. The manipulators start to panic. They send messages, create drama, try to provoke a reaction, anything to pull him back into the emotional game. But the Sigma doesn't play anymore. He's learned that reacting gives power and silence reclaims it. Now he observes from a distance, calm and unmoved, while the chaos he used to absorb consumes the ones who created it. His absence becomes their reflection, a mirror showing them what they really are when they can't use him as a distraction. The mirror showing them what they really are when they can't use him as a distraction. This silence also strengthens him internally. It's not coldness, it's self-control. It's the realization that peace isn't something you argue for. It's something you protect through restraint. He no longer needs to defend himself because he knows the truth doesn't require explanation. His silence becomes his armor. Impenetrable, mysterious, unshakable. What people don't understand is that when the Sigma male goes quiet, it's not emptiness, it's evolution. The less he speaks, the more his presence commands attention. His silence doesn't just end manipulation, it reverses it. The ones who once controlled the narrative now can't stop thinking about him. Because nothing disarms a manipulator faster than a man who no longer reacts, a man whose silence carries the weight of power, not pain. Moves with discipline, not emotion. Strategy replaces sensitivity. When a Sigma male stops caring, his movements change completely. He's no longer driven by how he feels, he's guided by what makes sense. Emotion used to be his compass, now discipline is. Every decision becomes deliberate, every step calculated. He doesn't rush to respond, doesn't react to pressure, and doesn't let temporary feelings destroy long-term focus. His life becomes a mission, one led by logic, clarity, and purpose. And that transformation is what makes him truly dangerous. He's learned that emotions, while powerful, can be traps. They can be used against you, manipulated, or twisted until you no longer recognize your own truth. So he stops letting emotions dictate his moves. When he feels anger, he channels it into progress. When he feels disappointment, he turns it into drive. His emotions still exist, he just owns them now, instead of letting them own him. That's the difference between chaos and control. The Sigma male's discipline becomes unshakable. He sets his routines, guards his focus, and refuses to waste energy on distractions. While others chase instant gratification, he chases mastery. He no longer cares about being understood, he cares about becoming unstoppable. Every hour of solitude, Every disciplined choice, every sacrifice he makes, silently builds the empire he's creating in the background. He's not trying to prove anyone wrong anymore, he's simply proving himself right. This new way of living intimidates people who still live impulsively. They can't understand how he remains calm under pressure, how he doesn't chase revenge or validation, or how he seems immune to drama. But that's the power of strategy. It gives him emotional control that others mistake for coldness. He's not cold, he's focused. He doesn't suppress his feelings, he directs them. When sensitivity turns into strategy, the Sigma male becomes untouchable. He no longer reacts to life, he designs it. Every move is intentional, every word calculated, every silence purposeful. Because when a man replaces emotion with discipline, he stops playing defense and starts building his own game. And once the Sigma male reaches that level of control, no one and nothing can shake his foundation again. When he stops caring, nothing external can break his peace again. When a Sigma male stops caring, he doesn't become empty, he becomes free. The noise of the world, the opinions, the expectations, all of it fades into the background. What used to trigger him now feels distant, almost irrelevant. Because once a man learns that peace is something built inside, nothing outside can destroy it. His calm becomes unshakable. His detachment becomes his armor. And his silence turns into a wall that chaos simply can't climb. He's been through the cycle before. Caring too much, giving too much, being pulled into storms that weren't his to fight. He's felt the sting of betrayal, the weight of disappointment, and the exhaustion of always being the one who tried. But when he finally lets go, everything changes. He stops seeking closure, stops chasing explanations, and stops giving energy to things that drain him. His mind clears, his priorities align, and for the first time, peace doesn't feel fragile, it feels permanent. The world doesn't stop testing him, it just stops affecting him. People still lie, disappoint, and judge, but he's no longer tied to their behavior. Their noise doesn't echo inside him anymore. He's learned to observe without absorbing, to hear without reacting, to feel without losing balance. That's what makes him dangerous, not because he's ruthless, but because he's untouchable. You can't control a man whose emotions are no longer up for negotiation. His peace becomes his most powerful possession. He doesn't argue, he doesn't explain, and he doesn't fight battles that don't matter. He simply removes himself. His energy becomes selective, his boundaries unshakable, and that serenity unsettles those who still feed on chaos. Because they can't reach him anymore, the reactions they used to provoke are gone, replaced by silence and stillness that say more than words ever could. When a Sigma male stops caring, he doesn't lose himself, he finds himself. He becomes centered, grounded, and free from the emotional turbulence that once dictated his every move. That's when he realizes true strength isn't in control over others, it's in control over himself. And once he masters that, peace stops being something he protects. It becomes who he is. When a Sigma male stops caring, he doesn't become heartless. He becomes focused. His silence, his calm, his discipline, they're not weakness, they're evolution. He's no longer fighting to be understood. He's building in peace, thinking long-term, and moving with precision. That's what makes him dangerous, not his anger, but his control. He's the man who can't be provoked, distracted, or broken, because once you've mastered yourself, the world loses its power over you. That's the real transformation, when nothing external can touch your inner calm. If you've reached that point where you no longer react, you just rise, then you already understand the mindset of the Sigma. Before you go, subscribe to UltraWise. the home of disciplined minds, silent power, and masculine clarity. And if this message hit you deeply, tap the word unbreakable in the comments so I know you're one of the few who've learned to rise in silence.